Hello everyone, and welcome back to Inside ArtScroll, where the books you read and the people who write them come to life. Today we are privileged to be joined by Rabbi Avrohom Neuberger, chief editor of the brand new Sefer Chofetz Chaim released by ArtScroll. Thank you, Rabbi Neuberger, for being here.
My pleasure.
Now I should mention before we get into our conversation about Sefer Chofetz Chaim, you are by no means new to the ArtScroll family.
Not at all,
You've been writing for many years. You've worked on the Shanstein Talmud, both Babli
and Yerushalmi. Right?
And Yerushalmi. What else have you worked on other than that?
I work. This project actually is a conjunction with Chofetz Chaim Heritage Foundation.
Exactly.
So I published positive vision about shemiras Einayim together with the same type of shutvis, and also Rabbi Tzvi Reisman has contemporary halachic shilas that I edited.
You edited as well.
Yeah.
Now this was a major project of which you were the chief editor. So there's a team of Talmidei Chachamim who worked on the elucidation of the Sefer Chofetz Chaim. Let's back up a little for those who know, those who may not know as much.
Right.
What is the Sefer Chofetz Chaim? Obviously, it was written by the Chofetz Chaim.
Right. And defined him. He became the Chofetz Chaim.
He became known as the Chofetz Chaim because of this Sefer.
Right.
But the Chofetz Chaim also wrote another Sefer called Sefer shemiras halashon, which some people don't realize is actually a separate Sefer.
Right.
So just give us a little background what the Sefer Chofetz Chaim addresses and how it differs from the Sefer shemiras halashon.
Right. So they should be in different sections in the bookshelf. There's the halacha section with Mishnah Brura, and even let's say Rav Chaim Kanievsky's Derech Hamuna is supposed to be there, Hilchos Ram, and it's primarily it focuses on the halacha of lashon hara. It doesn't get into the musar primarily. It's about all the halacha. Obviously, in the psichi it does get more inyandik, but it's primarily about the halacha. And if you're going to learn in yeshiva, you have to learn it in halacha seder. Shemiras halashon is the musar, is the inspiration, and so forth, to inspire somebody to stay away from speaking lashon hara. The goal of the Sefer was very much, and it was my goal, was to make this point clear. Because I know when I learned Hilchos Lashon Hara, when I was in yeshiva, that was something to learn like during Mussar Seder. Because, I know what halachas exactly? Who cares? It didn't make a difference so much. The main thing is I should be inspired. I learn by two halachas a day and I'm good. But it's not true. It's very complicated halachas, and you have to know when to speak, when you're allowed to speak, when you're not allowed to speak, when you have to speak. All that has to be clarified, and that's what we were trying to do. So, as opposed to shemiras halashon, which is like an inspiration sefer, Hilchos Lashon Hara is really about halacha. But I have to say that the Chofetz Chaim's passion, he couldn't control himself. Like in Nagar sometimes, like he'll go on a whole diatribe about what goes on in shuls, and shmuzing and shemiras and so forth, which is not specifically halacha, but like his passion comes across in the halacha too. Right. But it's primarily, it's about a halacha sefer, and you need the same degree of clarity that you have when you learn anything else. Mishnah Brura, Hilchos Shabbos, you need the same clarity when you learn Hilchos Lashon Hara.
Now, in a conversation before this interview, we were schmoozing about this monumental project, and you mentioned that it was a particularly challenging elucidation, more so than, let's say, the work that you did on the Shanstein Talmud, which is a Veltz project that has changed the world. And all the other Talmidei Chachamim who worked on that. Why was Sefer Chofetz Chaim so much more challenging?
So there was a couple of issues that we had to work with. First of all, because he made like a yesh meyayin, right? The Chofetz Chaim, there was no Hilchos Lashon Hara b'chlal. The cynics, if you don't mind me bringing it up, say that, you know what? The whole sefer is not true because he's taking a midah and making a halacha sefer out of it. Midas are midas, and halachas are halachas. There's a guy who wrote a whole diatribe about that. Yeah, whatever. And it's true. It was a chiddush. He codified midas keilu, but it's not true because it sounds like a cool taina, like an intellectual taina you can say in the university somewhere. But it's not true because just go. It doesn't. If you had your feet on the ground, just not true. There's a stug of apeit lasa. Somebody has to figure out exactly what that when means. Yes, when not. Yeah, apei mora. There's in lashon on the meat like a million different things. The Chofetz Chaim is just talking about halachas which were scattered in different places in Shas, but what concrete halachas. It's not true. There's a midas sefer, like we spoke about the shemiras halashon. That's true, but there were halachas that had to be addressed. And
for those viewers who don't know what apitlas is, that's speaking in front of
three people that once. Okay, there's 5 different pshatim in apitlas. Look at the Hilchos Lashon Hara. We have a whole introduction on it, but apitlas, the most common way is that once everybody knows about it, once 3 people know about it, then it becomes mutter to share. There's a million different times which limit it.
Which I want to talk about that, but just for a second to go back. The Chofetz Chaim wrote this Sefer Chofetz Chaim in the late 1800s or so, right? Right. The Chofetz Chaim was nifter about 100 years ago. Right. Is it surprising to you that over all the years no one ever wrote a Sefer like this?
It's interesting. I mean, the Rambam in Hilchos in Hilchos Deis at the end, like he does put it down as as Allah, and the Shara Tshuva also does. Why did nobody else do it? It's interesting. I'm not sure exactly why that was. And it's a kasha mispakeshes. I guess someone had to put it together in one place. I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Who knows what the reason is? But it was kind of a preparation for the age of technology.
Yeah, I'll say, yeah.
Really, the Sefer came out some decades before technology exploded.
Right.
And I know we're diving right into it here, but there seems to be a palpable difference today. Once we're talking about Lashon Hara, between print media. I know you advise Mishpacha magazine in elements of what to print, what not to print, and online media, whereas print media seems to be very vigilant about what's printed. And in online media, in certain venues, certain platforms, it's like the Wild West. If there are allegations against someone, these platforms run with it, and then people comment on it, and then I would imagine clear violations of Hilchos Shemiras halashon.
I can't imagine what the guidelines. I mean, they have to have harav to even to regulate what they're doing. Listen, there's halacha that if everybody knows a certain thing, a certain piece of information that might be negative, there are situations when everybody knows about it anyway, so you could share it. That's true. With the right to know being present. But the problem is that one clear t'nai is that you can't expand it further, like Bir Achas is one, and not to the second city. So the whole goal of the website is to be mefarsim the information further.
Right.
That's what they're trying to do. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in business, right? So they're trying to be mefarsim information that had a limited audience to a larger audience. That's not kosher. That's beferish lashon hara, and it's in the worst possible way. It destroys reputations, destroys everything. That's what it's all about. That's the whole damage of it. And I don't know. It's like it's exactly like you said. It's the Wild West. I don't get how it's not regulated more. I don't know.
It's almost not possible not to expand the sphere of influence.
Right. Of course.
I mean,
now, I guess you could say,
like you said, if everyone knows it, then everyone knows it. Why would it be reported?
Right.
And if people don't know it, then it's a problem. It's no different than sitting in shul after shachars and people are schmoozing to eavesdrop on the latest hack. And
it becomes like public information, and it's the Wild West. Exactly. It's hard to understand what's going on.
And the only reason
on the web, since it's like not such a kosher platform, Kilu. There are certain websites that mefarsim people's simchas, and people are over negia beferish there. Like I don't understand what's going on. Like, where's the protest against it? Like, I'm just saying, I'm jumping to a different topic. But like, how could if it's on the internet, I guess people just ignore it? I don't get what's going on.
It's a bigger topic for a different time.
It's a bigger topic for another conversation.
I think the basic premise seems to be, and maybe this is more for an Agudah convention session than for an interview about a brand new Sefer. But to wrap this up, I think my own novice opinion is that because lechatchila, it was sketchy about how to deal with the internet. So it kind of, once the genie was out of the bottle, it was never put back in, and that's the result.
But it's got to be, it has to be regulated.
But the reason why we discuss it here, because it's an important topic.
Extremely important topic.
If Neuberger, a frum Jew, is accused of embezzling money, and it's reported by the mainstream media, why in the world should the frum media ever report such a thing? Right.
It's nobody's business. There's no tayelis. You're expanding the sphere of people that know about it. The guy has to bounce back. People have a right to do tshuva. Everything's regulated. It doesn't make any sense. It does not make any sense.
Mamash in a second, a person's livelihood, their reputation, their family's reputation, shidduchim, it could be destroyed in a moment.
In 1 second. Right. I was once. I'll go into my own history a second. I came to ArtScroll because Rabbi Chaim Molinowitz, who I was extremely influenced by, he was like he was an unusual person. He had more energy than like 5 people roll into one. Like, he died in 1968. Like, he was just a barrel of information, of information and energy. It was like unbelievable. Anyways, he introduced me to ArtScroll, and he was also a dayan and a rav. He was a million different hats. So there was an accusation that came out against a prominent person. And I asked him, I was a koil, I would say, Bacher maybe at that time, maybe koil. I said, is any smoke, is any fire with the smoke? He said, I have no idea. But all I know is that if you make any accusation against anybody, you can't defend yourself. If they accuse me about something, what are you going to say? The accusation is the killer. And you put something like this in the paper, somebody embezzled. I don't know, maybe yeah, maybe not. There's always 2 sides of the story. People call me up. I'm a rav. People call me up about choshen mishpashayla. I said, you're wasting your time. You're wasting your time because you're going to make me a beautiful case that's going to be 100%. That the guy was wrong and you're right, and I can tell you, according to you, say I'm going to pass. I'll tell you but you're wasting your time because as soon as I speak to the other side, it's called time v'nitten mi baldvam. Because you need 2 people to say each side. It's ridiculous, and you're wasting your time. And any rav who says who in choshen mishpat particularly, who says it doesn't make any sense. You have to hear what the other side said. It's ridiculous. So like somebody embezzled something. Whatever is one side against another side, you have to both start them. It's absurd. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Now getting back to the Sefer.
Getting back to the Sefer. Yeah. So you're talking about what made it challenging.
What made it challenging?
What made it challenging is the Chofetz Chaim was dealing with original text that had no Mesorah as a halacha per se. In other words, he was making a yesh miyayin, he was making a hilchos lashon hara from calling different sugyas and putting it together as halachas. So there's a lot of different tanaim, and every single halacha. That's what makes it so hard to pass on about shidduchim, about whatever thing comes up. You have to keep so many things up in the air. So when he's writing the Sefer, he's covering for all those different tanaim within a single sentence. So by the time in the 21st century mind has ended a sentence that has gone on, it's like reading Rav Samson Falhorsh's farm, these long sentences. What happened at the beginning? What happened? There was so many tanaim in the middle. It's confusing.
Keep track.
Yeah, it's hard to keep track. So like when we wrote it, we had. I had to realize, okay, I'm going to have to stop the sentence in the middle of the Chofetz Chaim, kilu, and put a period, and then restart the sentence with the further time just to make it readable. That was one thing, and all these innovations took time, like to realize how to go about it. Another thing was that he uses pronouns, the mesaper, and it gets confusing.
When you're translating it.
Yeah. Who spoke about who again? So at a certain point, we decided that we're going to put in a proper noun instead of pronouns. So it was Ruvain against Shimon. So all these things made it challenging. And then the third thing is, like, you want to know, you were asking me why it was harder than Gemara. In the Gemara, we had a mahalach. You wrote Gemara, Rashi, and problems. In other words, Gemara, Rashi's Mufarish, and also Rashi's like, and you know from any time you learn Gemara without Rashi, it's like impossible. Rashi is unbelievable. He just walks you through it. So there's no Rashi, right? So there's Chofetz Chaim, and then what's now? Like, so you have a problem with the Chofetz Chaim. So the Meir Chaim, we chose the ones which explained what he was trying to do and the Ikamar Mekaimis. But if there's a problem with something, like where do you look?
So you do quote from quite a few contemporary svarim.
Right.
Excellent svarim.
Excellent svarim, unbelievable. There's a statement called the Sivas Oilam from somebody, Kaufman in Bnei Brak. I would love to meet this fellow. If anybody is out there knows who he is, I would love to meet him. It's unbelievable how well he went through these things. He went through the sugyas from the top down. He has a huge amount of notes in the back of the Sefer. Unbelievably thorough. He has excellent haskamas also. I have no idea what this is. I went through, I think, 5 different printings, and it's hard to find it in the regular form. So excellent. And then Rabbi Yamin Cohen, the Chelkes Binyamin, extremely good. And So, like psychologically, I had to get over the hump of quoting contemporaries, which is you like Rashi, Pnei Yeshua asks, Ritva asks. Okay, that's halashon. I mean, we don't call it halashon, but to quote, even in ArtScroll, there was a version of quoting contemporaries. You didn't get down to looking, I don't know, an Arze Halvana, I don't know, some Heintige Sefer on Saturday. You didn't do that. But over here, the Chofetz Chaim was only 150 years ago, so you had to get used to quoting contemporaries. But that was it was also another shlav, and the halachas themselves are very complicated. They're just complicated, and it's not a Musa Sefer, it's a halacha Sefer, and you have to get the facts straight. There's l'mashal, okay? There's an area of halacha called that where even though the person is an amisecha, but you're saying the lashon hara, so that people should lekanias emes, he calls it lekanias emes, that people should know that certain behavior is not acceptable. Now, obviously, that's a dangerous area, but the Shara Tshuva has a whole chelik about that, and the Mishnah Berurah and the Chofetz Chaim goes through in the halachas lekanias emes. It's extremely complicated, and I think in the volume 2 we're going to make a whole appendix about lekanias emes, which, when you just read the Sefer, you just, whatever, you're winging it, So
Are you saying that, but does the elucidation make it enough, shavel l'chol nefesh, meaning approachable, that men, woman, or child who picks up the Sefer, that they'll be able to navigate it? That was the goal.
That's what we tried to do. Hopefully we accomplished that. The time will tell if we did it enough. That was the whole goal was clarity to make it something that's shavel l'chol nefesh.
Is there anyone in particular that you want to give credit to? Because I know it was a team of Talmid Chachamim.
Yeah.
Anyone in particular that you want to give credit to as far as this elucidation?
So a couple of things. First of all, Rabbi Aryeh Dana had written an earlier translation of Sefer Chofetz Chaim, not ArtScroll style, not linear, Hebrew bold, and then not bold. That type of direct translation did not exist. But he had a translation of the Sefer that he pushed Mr. Rothschild to have it done ArtScroll style. And we did use his original translation sort of as the basis for the translation that I used. It was, it was the background. He also contributed towards the notes, interesting things. Also, I should throw in that the Dirshu Chofetz Chaim has a copious amount. It's like the Oiz V'Hadar on
Sefer Chofetz Chaim.
Like all over the place. Amazing research. And then there was Rabbi Yosef Weiss. Rabbi Yosef Weiss, who was Nifta Nebuch 2 years ago?
Yeah, he was the Manal of Shagasarya in Lakewood.
And he was a Talmud of the Manchester Rosh Yeshiva, and very, very close with him. And the Manchester Rosh Yeshiva, really pushed Sefer Chofetz Chaim. The whole 2 halachas a day is from the...
It's his innovation.
It's his innovation. And he was fire about making an ArtScroll type of Chofetz Chaim. And
did you ever meet Rabbi Weiss?
I met him I met him on the phone many times.
But not in person.
Somehow we kept that we never. But I spoke to him, I don't know, endless amount of times, and he was so encouraging and he was so wonderful. It was like that's tzaddik. I had no idea he was that sick. Even he would say something here and there, and at the end suddenly his voice suddenly went out. I said, "Whoa, what's going on there?" And then I found out from maybe that wasn't well. But he was so passionate about it, and he was the first reviewer of the Sefer. In other words, in the ArtScroll, there's the writer.
This is going back a few years ago. So this is a project of
about 4 years. Right.
4 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
So basically, I was the only guy working on it. So. So I would send it to him, and he would write back his ha'aris. Like in an ArtScroll project, there's the writer, there's the editor, and there's the reader.
Right.
So he was the reader, and his reading and his ha'aris were almost always about clarity, about making. He was pushed to Reuven Shimon.
That was his idea.
Very much. There's also Mrs. Applebaum was very, very involved in getting this project done, but. Yeah, but he pushed it. He said anything for clarity. That was his thing, and his whole encouragement was, my screensaver is Rabbi Weiss. He was amazing. He was really an amazing person. I wish I got to know him better, but the Sefer should be a chus for him. And after he was nifta, so then Rabbi Lowy who's a big
from
big
Toronto.
From Toronto, he's a big posik b'chlal, and he's a big expert in Hilchos Lashon Hara. He's like the posik for Chofetz Chaim Heritage Foundation. So he reviewed the Sefer from beginning to end, which was also a source of security for me, to know that somebody of that stature is reviewing the Sefer. Yeah.
Is there one area of shemiras halashon that now that you went through the Sefer in writing it for 4 years, is there one area that you find that the hamoinam, the masses, are lacking knowledge in? One nekuda, one halacha, something that's or something that was eye-opening to you?
Well, I tell you what was eye-opening like this. And obviously I became much more aware of it, right? It did act like a Musa Sefer on me specifically, because I'm a schmoozer. We could talk about, but so I like schmoozing. So, but any conversation is fraught with that possibility. But one thing that came across was that in any given conversation, to veer a conversation away from Lashon Hara, from regular people, is not that hard. I heard there was one Rav that gave a speech about Lashon Hara, and he asked, "What do you do if somebody said, well, what do you think about that guy?" And you're in a conversation, you don't want to stick ears, you don't make moves. He says, "There's one word that'll save you from every Lashon Hara: whatever." Just say whatever. That you're not making masking, you're not making your face, you're not saying anything, you're not looking like a noise, whatever. You just reroute.
Someone once told me the best way to stay out of the trap of Lashon Hara is to talk about issues, not people.
Yeah, right. That's true. Right.
Talk about topics.
Right. So that's right. So I discovered
you could be a good schmoozer on topics.
Yeah, right. So what I discovered was that so in any given conversation, you could always whatever it, kilo, and reroute the conversation and talk about something else. But like the Chofetz Chaim talks about the Baalei Lashon Hara, it's like there's a whole souk called Baalei Lashon Hara. Those people, I don't want to say this, they're poisoned. Every single conversation, that's how their mind gravitates. It always is about the schmutz. You know what I mean? And there's almost no way to converse with such a person without talking Lashon Hara. And these are. It's a whole way of life. If Chas v'Shalom, the person is a Baal Lashon Hara, really he has to reroute his way of thinking. It's like a poisoned way of thinking. That was very much an eye opener for me. Like somebody that the people who just tend towards Lashon Hara really have to I
have an interesting question. Yeah. Someone once asked me, and I didn't tell you that I wanted to discuss this, but it just came to mind. Yeah. Someone once asked me, how come in the Frum publications there's no such a thing as a restaurant review? I remember someone once asked me, and I said, because we can't really be honest. Right? A restaurant review is designed that if you love the restaurant, you're going to say how great it is. Right. But if you don't like it, you're also going to say so. But who in their right mind in a Frum publication is going to want to hurt someone's parnassa? Right. That's a practical example of where, in the Welt, a restaurant review is a very normal thing. Right. To us, we're allergic to such a thing. We would never think of hurting someone else's parnassa.
Right. In a book review, which we do have, right?
Book reviews we have, but they're basically all praising the product. So.
Right. We're sitting in an ArtScroll studio over here. The philosophical world has tinus on the hagiography. They have a word for it. Right? Hagiography. That the biographies are only focusing on. They're not getting around in the. There's something called Lashon Hara. You can't just justify it off the cuff. Right. The thing is this, I mentioned before the halacha l'kania emes, right? L'kania emes is an idea where the Chofetz Chaim, you see. It's not about not talking. When things have to be criticized, they're supposed to be criticized. Even though the specific halacha is we're talking about somebody who is amisecha, that means he hasn't done anything that's so bad. He's not a mumulahachis, and he's not a moiser. He's not anything he's not awful, but he does averis that have influence on other people, and therefore you want to speak negatively about him so that people should not follow his lead. That's basically it. Or maybe he himself will change. But the guy's still amisecha. But does it have to do so if you know he's still in the same thing? It's very complicated. Now, Lashon Hara, no, there's something you have to also correct society's ills. It is a tricky thing that it's not just about not talking. When things have to, the Chazon Ish famously said that when it comes to leaders, this becomes even more amplified. That, he's a chashuv person, so you're not allowed to say anything about him. He goes the opposite direction. When somebody's in a leadership position and his views are influential, then that's the reason why actually you could be more critical of him, because you have to make sure that his views, if they're wrong, and you better be sure that you're not coming with your own agenda, are not influencing people in a bad way. It's like it's a tricky thing, yeah.
But people use the term litayeles, freely to enable them to speak about certain things.
Yeah.
And I think the one area that's prevalent, even to those who are really, really careful about shemiras halashon, is shidduchim. Right. It's very hard to get out of the way. Someone calls you up as a reference and asks you very specific questions. Right. Well, what guidance would you have? Someone calls, do you know anything about the person's siblings? And there's a sibling with an emotional issue. Right. How to navigate that. Right. Yes to say, not to say, when to say, how to say it. Doesn't matter where in the process of shidduchim they're holding, so on and so forth.
So I'll be honest with you. Even though I already wrote the Sefer, I don't feel 100% confident to answer such questions yet. Okay. I would say I'll call Rabbi to make sure I get it right. But I will say this much, that in the second volume, we're going to have a special appendix on shidduchim. Yeah. We're going to have an appendix, Mr. Hashem, on shidduchim, on media, lashon hara in the media, which is obviously an amazing thing, and also l'kanei emes, which is the whole sugya that when you learn the Sefer, you want to find out exactly how that's working. But in general, I don't think you could say, you could share information that, I don't want to say this because there are so many
variables.
There are so many variables because there is a different level of obligation to somebody that you know on a personal level, or somebody that's just calling you from, like, if a Rav calls me from left field and he wants to know, well, tell me about this family. What do you have to say about this? I'm not going to get into details. What do I know about your family? In other words, so is it a problem? It depends on. So if I would say all the details, then nobody's going to get it. Nobody's going to get married. You know what I mean? Right. If somebody finds out about my family, who knows what? Everybody has their things. So you really have to know when it's a teilus, when it's not a teilus, and it does too many variables almost to answer.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Hilchos lashon hara is so complicated.
Right.
Is it really possible? I know this is a loaded question.
Yeah.
Is it really possible for the layman, who studies Sefer Chofetz Chaim, and whether they study Sefer shemiras halashon for the musar ethical aspect of it or not, we'll leave aside, because I think that's a major component of it. Right. If you understand the emotional ramifications of Hilchos shemiras halashon, then hopefully you'll connect much more to the halachic part of it.
Right.
But let's leave that aside. Are Hilchos lashon hara so complicated that the layman can't pick up the Sefer and master enough so that they could apply it in their life?
Okay, so I'll answer. I have a good question. So I have two answers to this. Two examples to answer the question. When it comes to Hilchos Shabbos, right? Most Hilchos Shabbos questions, if you don't know Hilchos Shabbos at all, there's no hava meaning you're going to keep Shabbos properly. Right. You could have all the inspiration, like you love Shabbos to death.
Like the Chofetz Chaim writes in his Hakdama.
Right, exactly. You just know what to do. You have to learn the halachas. Are Hilchos Shabbos complicated? Whoa, they're complicated. Hilchos Bilshul, is tough. So what do you do? So after you reach some level of competence, then you know how to keep 80% of the halachas, and 20% you better ask and be careful about, or 90 as you become more and more competent. If you don't any halachas at all, then you're gone. As you become more competent, the sphere of sveikus becomes more and more small. But if you're not going to become basically cognizant of the halachas of lashon hara, it's very hard to get exactly.
So you're saying the more knowledgeable you become,
right.
then the less sveikus you have.
The less sveikus you have.
You're saying you have to have a rav.
You do have to have a rav. Right.
You have to have a rav.
Right.
But hopefully, listen.
And also, when you're answering, like somebody calls you up about a loaded question about shidduchim, you have to say, I'm not sure exactly. Let me call back. I'll call you back. I don't have time right now. You don't want to say lashon hara. That's going to undermine.
But I've heard from big rabbanim who said that the key for people to learn halacha is to know what question to ask.
Right, exactly.
And that's really what Sefer Chofetz Chaim, what you did here.
Right.
This elucidation will enable people
Right.
to know what's a shaila.
Yeah,
Without
that's
learning
right,
it, you don't even know what the shaila is.
Right,
You didn't
right,
even know that there is a shaila.
Right.
So this Sefer is really an amazing, you were speaking about clarity. From going through it myself, I saw how clear it is, how easy it is to understand.
One big feature I just want to say is that we added, you asked me if it was good for ages of...
different ages.
Yeah, one thing we did is we added scenarios, which is, in other words, we try to make it the halacha that was being portrayed, as
on a practical level.
On a practical level. A lady is a shetelmacher, and everybody schmoozes. So, one of the halachas that he talks about is that if you can't get halashon, it's a law say you have to give up your job, really. So, so what are you going to do about that? There's a lot of scenarios that bring it down to earth. Exactly, how to relate to Hilchos Lashon Hara in a tangible way, that was also another like a psychological hurdle to get over, because in the regular ArtScroll work that I was working on in the past, you never have something I'm a me that way, something so
relatable to
relatable. This it's a Sefer, but it's not that so we had to bridge that gap of making Hilchos Lashon Hara into something that's tangible with scenarios and so forth. Right, it was interesting, yeah.
Well, you've done a masterful job.
I hope so.
We want to thank you on behalf of all the people who are going to benefit from this amazing Sefer. Thank you for all your efforts. Thanks as well to all the Talmidei Chachamim who worked in tandem with you to bring this to publication. And we're looking forward to Mitzvah Shem in a year or two, whenever it is that you put out volume 2. We'll look forward to that as well. So thank you, Rabbi Neuberger. Thank you for joining us, and continued atzlacha in your Rabbonis and being Marbitz Torah and being Madrich people. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.